Welcome. And since I left academia, I have gotten involved in something I wish I had known about when I was either a doctoral student or an academic. And that's called the Feldenkrais method. And hopefully we'll share or introduce you to enough that you might say, maybe this is something I want to look at a little bit further. It is uncharted research territory in science and math education. Any research that's been done has been done in the wellness community with chronic pain, with neurological disorders. But it has some power and crumbs for lots of things. So I am a former academic and classroom teacher, and I'd like Beth and Katherine to introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here today. Excuse me. My name is Beth Sidlow Mann. My first career was teaching music in the public schools, choral and instrumental music. Then I spent quite a bit of time doing the Feldenkrais method as a practitioner and assistant trainer. And I am currently teaching general education. I have a second grade class, and I'm actually in my second grade classroom today. Thank you for having me.
Aloha, I'm Katherine Mitchell, and I am also a Feldenkrais practitioner. I studied with Moshe Feldenkrais in 1983 and have been doing Feldenkrais full-time since then. And I ended up going into elementary schools and doing Feldenkrais work and got some serendipitous discoveries, and I'm excited to be here and share with you a little bit more about Feldenkrais work in education.
Okay. So we divided our session, which is really atypical. You probably noticed we have an hour and everybody else gets like 15, 20 minutes to talk about a research study. So we are going to allow you to experience something that's very hard to describe. And the common thread through both of these is inquiry. And inquiry, as you know, in science and math education is, the critical, the crucial concept, big idea. It's how we go about knowing what we know. So, ask you questions, experience an abbreviated Feldenkrais experience. Beth and Katherine will both share their experiences and the work that they've done using the Feldenkrais method in school settings, and share some of our thoughts about value and connections, theoretical underpinnings. So, I don't know, have you heard of it? Anybody heard of it? Okay. It's a learning system. And it's a learning system in which movement is used, great focus is put on attention, attending to sensation. And the benefit through that is awareness and what can come with awareness. It is already used in certain kinds of situations, the performing arts, sports, athletics. It's used in the professional world as well. And as you'll learn from especially Katherine, very helpful for students living with learning challenges. So on the left is, our images of, what I knew inquiry was. And these are shots from my work with students in the Rocky Mountain region. And on the right are a couple of images from a project that was done in Israel. Moshe Feldenkrais is very well known in Israel and in Europe, less known here in this country. And so this was from a teacher professional development project in math education context. So you can see that people are using their bodies in ways that are a little bit different. So we'd like to ask you to ponder a few questions. What is movement to you? When you think about what comes up? There's an expression we turn around a lot now, movement helps brain. How does that happen? And since you're working in science and math education, research in classrooms, where and when is there space for movement in classrooms today? And we're just emerging from a very global situation as a result of the pandemic. So the classroom's been the home environment, but slowly we're moving back into communal settings again. And as we move through some of the aspects of our session, we'd like you to think about, with what you experience and what you know in the work that you've done, how do you think that Feldenkrais experiences and thinking might add to learning? So here's where we shift into an experience of your own. And throughout this experience, I'm going to spotlight a few foundational elements of what the Feldenkrais method is. But since it's something that is better understood through physical experience, that's why we thought we'd allow some time for a short, we call them lessons in the Feldenkrais world. So Feldenkrais lessons typically start with sensory scanning in some way. And the first scanning is a way of assessing where you're at. In the academic world, we call it pre-assessment or pre-tests, right? And then it ends with a sensory scanning. And in the academic world, the word is often post-test, post-assessment. So in the Feldenkrais world, these scans at the beginning, at the end, and interspersed throughout allow you to really tune into yourself, to pay attention to what's happening. So I don't know where you're sitting on your chair right now, but go ahead and move forwards a little bit in your chair, but in a way that you can sit comfortably. And you can either choose to leave your eyes open or shut your eyes. Many times people choose to close their eyes because then that removes visual stimuli and allows folks to kind of sense more deeply what's happening, but your choice. And as you sit, just let your attention go to your breathing. Notice the sensation of movement that's within yourself as you breathe. Your rhythm. Where do you feel the experience of breathing? And then shift your attention to your mouth, your jaw. Are your teeth in contact with each other? Are you clenching? Does your jaw feel tight? Is there softness? And what do you sense about your neck? Are you a person that experiences neck tension? And then allow your attention to migrate throughout the whole of yourself. Just move as it will, and notice places of softness, what you might consider to be softness. You might call this a sense of feeling relaxed. Observe if your mind is chattering to yourself, active thoughts are flying through in some way, or are you quiet within? And as you listen to my voice and tune into yourself, are you wanting to move on? Or is it possible to wait patiently, curious as to what might come next? And what else is in the forefront of your attention? So the Feldenkrais method is inviting you to pay attention in different ways. Attention begets awareness. And if you start yawning, right, that often happens. Yawns mean something. And I chose mouth and jaw movements because they dominate action in the classroom or in the learning environment. And we use our mouths in many ways, from whispering, not saying anything, speaking, and sometimes shouting. And often unconsciously, we clench our jaws or grind our teeth. And clenching is also something associated with certain emotions. So what can happen when we consciously attend to the movements of our mouth and jaw? So continuing to sit comfortably, shift your attention back to the sensation around your mouth and jaw, your cheeks, around your eyes, your face. Is there a word that describes what you're sensing? Or a combination of words? And in the Feldenkrais method, in these experiences, we encourage you to move slowly with the least amount of movement that you can sense that you're moving, and always take care of yourself. If you find that you're starting to fatigue in some way, take a break, take a pause, take a rest. So open and close your mouth slowly, not necessarily a big movement, and notice how your lower jaw moves. Is there a particular direction that it takes? A straight line? Does it veer or curve? Or is it a wave? Does your head move as part of opening your lower jaw? And as you open and close your lower jaw slowly, what's happening with your breathing? Did it get interrupted or stopped? Does it continue in a rhythm, or does it start and stop? And then pause for a moment. And this time, as you open your mouth, tilt your head back. So you're opening your mouth, accompanied by the tilting of the head backwards, and closing it, tilting your head forwards again. And does tilting the head help in the opening and the closing of the mouth? And notice your neck sensation. Is there sensation of movement in the neck? Is there something that you could do that you might soften the musculature in your neck to help you open and close your mouth with more ease, more lightness? And then return to opening and closing your mouth without tilting your head a few times, and notice, has something changed? Maybe something in the movement, or something in your awareness and knowing what you're doing, a clarity that's emerging in some way. Maybe if the quality of the movement is changing, maybe it's more smooth, less resistance, a clearer line. And then just go ahead and pause and notice your breathing rhythm. Notice sensations in your mouth, your jaw, maybe your face, your cheeks, around your eyes, your neck. And then again, open your mouth, separating your lower jaw from your upper jaw just a little bit, and move your lower jaw to one side and back several times. And notice, which side did you choose? Just go to one side, whichever side you've chosen. And notice, are you breathing? Is your breathing rhythm interrupted as you move your jaw to this side and return it? And if your breathing rhythm is interrupted, do less movement to the side. Make it a smaller movement. Is it possible to move your lower jaw a little bit to the side and have a breathing rhythm that is uninterrupted? And then go ahead and move your lower jaw to the other side several times. And is it a different experience? Is the movement different? Or is your awareness of what you're doing different in some way? And are you still breathing, or have you paused in your breathing rhythm? And then go ahead and pause for a moment. Just allow yourself to breathe and notice your breathing rhythm. And then opening your mouth a little bit, separating your upper teeth and your lower teeth a little bit. Move your jaw back to the side that was easier or maybe clearer to you. Moving it to that side and returning it. Noticing your breath. Is it in the rhythm that you had? Or is it interrupted in some way, a stop and go? And we use breathing a lot in the Feldenkrais method as a signal for knowing how much effort we're putting into something. And whether we're moving in a way that is about self-care and is healthiest, most efficient, because breath reflects effort and disturbances. So notice your breathing as you move your jaw to this side that was easier and back. And notice if moving your jaw to this side and back invites your head to turn a little bit. And if it does, in what direction is that invitation? And if you are moving your lower jaw to whichever side you're moving it to, without moving your head, move your jaw to that side and move your head to that side at the same time and notice what happens to the movement. So your jaw and your head are turning in the same direction, going and returning a few times. And then move your lower jaw to the same side without moving your head. And is something different? Has something changed? Now sometimes, and go ahead and pause, sometimes we don't really know what we're doing, and so we can take our fingers and use self-touch to help us know. So if you take your fingers very lightly and place them, find your lower jaw, your mandible, and kind of trace it a little bit. Can you find the joint at which the lower jaw and the upper jaw come together? And maybe you need to move your mouth open and close a little bit, or to the same side that you've been working with and back to find that. And can you use your fingertips lightly to help you move your lower jaw to the side that you've been moving it to? And does the touch of your fingers somewhere in that sweet spot for you, does that touch help you to better know what you're doing? And then go ahead, pause, rest. And notice the sensation on the side of the face that you've been moving your jaw to and the other side of your face. Is there a difference between the two sides of your face? What about the whole side of you that you've been moving your jaw to compared to the other side of you? Is something different? And then open your jaw and close your jaw a few times. The movement that we did at the very beginning. And notice, has something changed in the movement or about the movement for you? As you move your jaw, opening and closing it a little bit, what's happening with your breathing? The rhythm of your breath, or the fullness of your breath. And then pause for a moment. And open your mouth slightly so that the upper teeth and lower teeth have a little bit of a gap between them. And this time only imagine moving your lower jaw to the other side and back several times slowly in your imagination. And notice if in your imagination your breathing changes. As you're imagining moving your lower jaw to this other side and back, what is happening with your breathing rhythm? You're imagining the movement of the lower jaw, but noticing your active breathing. And if your breathing changes, do less in your imagination. Can you seek in your imagination that sensation, that quality of movement when you moved your lower jaw to the first side and back? In your imagination. And once you feel that you have as clear a sense as you can at this moment, moving your lower jaw to your second side and back, go ahead and do it. Move your lower jaw to this second side. And notice what's in the forefront of your attention. And then pause. Let yourself sit. Sense yourself in sitting. Has something changed for you about your sitting experience and who you are as you sit on your chair? And begin to move your jaw to one side and then the other side a few times. Has something changed for you? Is something different? Notice your breathing as you move your jaw from one side to the other. If your breathing changes, can you do less so that you can breathe in a free and uninterrupted way and move your jaw at the same time? And then let go of that, pause, and let's go back to the very first movement of opening and closing the mouth, slowly. And has something changed in your experience of opening and closing your mouth? The quality of the movement, And we think of quality by smoothness, lightness, fluidity. We think of quality as uninterrupted breathing, full and free breathing. And since I think everybody has their mic on mute, I won't hear you. But if you're curious, you might try and say or sing something out loud to yourself and listen to the quality of your voice. Is the quality, the tone, the amplitude, the ease of forming sounds, is that different from your habitual, what you know is your normal quality? And I'll end the experience with a quote from Moshe Feldenkrais from his Awareness Through Movement book. We act in accordance with our self-image. Each one of us moves, speaks, thinks, and feels in a different way, each according to the image of himself that he has built up over the years. And in order to change our mode of action, we must change the image of ourselves that we carry within us. This self-image, in turn, governs every act and is conditioned in varying degrees by three factors: heritage, education, and self-education. So when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes. Slowly take in your environment. And notice places of softness within you now. Whether you have mental chatter, active thinking going on, or are you quieter within yourself? Is it possible to be curious and wait patiently? Or are you curious, wanting to move on? What's your experience of breathing now? And maybe something else is in the forefront of your attention. So let yourself notice that. So often when we do these, we call them awareness through movement experiences when they're done in a group setting. We have shifted ourselves so much out of a linguistic world in which we typically live, particularly as academics and researchers and educators, that it's nice to just stay in that field of sensation, that world of sensation. Rather than try and language what it is that's going on within you. And that's definitely something very non-habitual in this world. The world of research, classroom learning. So when you're ready, we'll transition into Beth sharing some of her experience with the Feldenkrais method in her classroom, in her learning environment.
Can I jump in just for a second?
Sure.
I just wanted to ask all the participants to remember the feeling that you have now compared to when you first came on the call. And we'll talk more about that. You'll hear more by just listening to Beth and I.
So Beth, maybe we forgot to come up with a system. Just lift your finger or something like that and let me know when you want me to shift the slide since I've got them.
Thank you. Well, Katherine, this was wonderful. I am so grateful for this lesson that you just did with us. And, you know, when we all had our microphones off and you suggested for us to speak and or sing and hear our voice, I didn't want to speak. I only wanted to whisper. So it's an interesting thing to go from this, for what was for me a very, very deep and profound awareness to movement lesson, into presenting about the work, but maybe it's the best possible situation. So hello, everybody. My name again is Beth Sidlow Mann, and I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner. I'm also a second grade classroom teacher and a mom, and I want to say a former music teacher, but I still have the passion for music. And I'm just going to set my timer to try to keep myself on track here. I'm really, really glad that we got to do this awareness through movement lesson with Katherine, because this is how I came into this work, doing the work for myself. I was a musician. I was in a couple car accidents, and I had sensation loss in my hands. And I was working as a music teacher, and I couldn't really use my hands the way I'd learned how to use them for teaching music. So after exhausting traditional modalities of treatment, eventually I landed on a neurologist who specialized in musicians, Dr. Frank Wilson, who referred me to a practitioner who did Feldenkrais with me. And in the first session of Feldenkrais, sensation came back into my hands. And then from there on, I was on a journey of looking to continue the benefits. So I started out learning about Feldenkrais while I was teaching junior high school choral and instrumental music. And I would go for these intensive 12, 13-day training segments, not looking to learn how to be a Feldenkrais practitioner, but just looking to do more of this work because it made me feel better and helped me to function better. So I would leave my students in the hands of a substitute. This was junior high, and I would come back after a couple weeks. And I found these methodologies and also just the approach to learning sneaking into my teaching. And what happened was that when I would apply Feldenkrais principles in my teaching, amazing things would happen in my classroom. My students would learn better, their behavior would improve, they could learn faster, their problem solving, their ability to independently address a problem improved, their retention of information improved, and I felt better also. So I became interested in that and looked for different ways to see if this was just my imagination or if students really were learning better. So let's go to the next slide, please, Katherine. So I worked as a mentor teacher and brought this work into elementary classrooms where in the district where I was teaching music. Then I took time off from teaching music and just did Feldenkrais full-time for a while and saw clients privately and worked in training programs and taught lots of classes. And then got to a certain point in my life where I wanted to go back into teaching in the school. So again, I started to teach music and sort of kept the Feldenkrais and the music separate from each other for a while. Then the next phase of my career was I wanted to be a classroom teacher. So I taught second grade for a year, then I taught third grade for a year, then I taught first and second grade in a combination class, distance learning during COVID. And this past year, I've been teaching second grade again. And although I love Feldenkrais work and think it's very, very beneficial to help students improve their learning. My hands were so full with just trying to get across the curriculum that I didn't really do much with Feldenkrais other than sort of an activity here and there, really just for fun. But then when Katherine approached me about sharing my experiences, I found myself coming up with a lesson that would incorporate Feldenkrais principles into math. And so one of the standards in second grade curriculum is learning about the clock and how to tell time with the clock. So just this past week, we were in chapter 7 of our Go Math curriculum. And there we come to the lessons on telling time. So with my students, I started relating time to their body. So this is my little boy. His name's Jacob. He's 5 years old. He's on our kitchen floor with a clock on his pelvis. And I introduced my students to the concept of time through their body. Next slide, please. So here we have a program that we use in the classroom that involves a lot of movement. So we find that students learn better if they are not sitting at their desk for a long time. So we get them up out of their seat. And here's a Go Noodle activity where students spell words by making the letters out of their body. It's called body spell. And you can see in the slide, the man is making the letter O by putting his hands over his head. And so the kids love it. They actually request it. And we do body spell at least once a week, more often when children are requesting it. So I said to the students, we can do body spell for spelling words, and we can also learn how to understand the clock and telling time with our body clock. Next slide, please. So on the first day of our clock lessons, I had the students sit on the floor, crisscross applesauce, and I drew a circle on the board and told them this is the clock. 12 o'clock is on the top, 6 o'clock is on the bottom. And I said, now you are sitting on a clock and your spine goes from your head through your neck, middle of your back, your lower back, all the way down your tailbone. Think that it can extend down to the floor and your spine points down to the middle of the clock. So I asked my students, and I'm going to ask you right now, if your feet are on the floor comfortably, think that 12 o'clock is in front of you and 6 o'clock is behind you, and simply roll your pelvis backward to lean on the hour of 6 o'clock, and roll your pelvis forward to lean on the hour of 12 o'clock, and go back and forth like this, slowly and gently, moving just in the range of what feels comfortable and easy to do. Roll your pelvis backward and lean on 6, roll your pelvis forward and lean on 12. And to my surprise, my students, my wiggly, squirmy, noisy, talkative little students just sat there and rolled their pelvises forward and back from 6 to 12. And notice as you roll backwards to 6, you can round your back and look a little bit downward. You can roll your pelvis forward to lean on 12, arch your back, push your tummy out a bit and look a little bit up, just gently back and forth. Next slide, please. And so here are the students in my classroom. They're leaning on their hands. They're rolling their pelvis forward and back. And we discussed 6 and 12 on the clock. And as they rolled forward and back, they paid attention to the contact that their pelvis made with the floor. And next slide, please. And we continued like this, forward and back and forward and back. So as the lesson progressed over 2 days, we learned that the clock included the hours of 12 and 6 forward and back. And then you can also roll to the right and to the left, to 6 and 3, to 9 and 3 on your clock. And gradually we talked about going all the way around the clock. I put in all the numbers. You can see the clock on the TV screen there in the picture. We went all the way around the clock, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, around and around. And here's a video of the students moving their pelvises around the clock. And you can see that's not sped up. That's real time with second graders. They move quickly. And the end result of this was that they felt the clock elements in their bodies. They quickly understood the clock. They learned the clock quickly and easily. And during that process, their focus and their concentration increased, and their behavior improved too. And so as a result of just incorporating the movement with the academic learning, these students got a better understanding of the clock and of the time, because they related it to their own body. But not only did they learn the material, and not only did their behavior improve and their concentration, they learned the content faster and more fully. So I had happy students. I was a happy teacher. Their focus and concentration increased. The whole environment of the classroom was calmed. The readiness to absorb the experience, the learning and the concentration shifted. And this typical grade 2 agitation that we have quieted. The thinking quality shifted to what seemed like a completely different paradigm. And the engagement was such that I had seen this happen many times before when using the Feldenkrais method within teaching music. But this was the first time as a general education teacher that I had this tremendous, huge positive response, melding the Feldenkrais approach into academic instruction. And now we're going to turn to Katherine Rosasco-Mitchell, and hear more about what she did in her schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth. That was wonderful. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, it's not going to let me. Let's see. No, it's not going to let me. That's okay. I will just, you can just put my slide back up and I'll just talk.
Try again. Try again.
Okay.
I just changed a setting.
Okay. There it is. Thank you. Okay. Did you see that okay? So again, my name is Katherine Mitchell, and I just want to give you a little bit of background. When I went to study with Moshe Feldenkrais, he's a world-renowned physicist, and what he understood about motion and the development of consciousness in the brain is just now hitting cognitive research. It's out there in cognitive research, but it's not integrated into the feeling of movement in the body. And that's really the gift of what Moshe Feldenkrais figured out, is not only that, but a method to enhance it. And I worked on chronic conditions for almost 30 years before I went into the elementary schools. And there was a really interesting discovery. People had musculoskeletal patterns that were mirroring the behavior of their mind. And so the integration between the physical feeling and what was going on with the illness was actually getting mirrored into the body. And so I got asked to, it was actually one of my clients asked me to go into an elementary school and do a physical education class. And so I went into the school, and you have to think about Feldenkrais work and movement. You have to kind of reframe it, because it's movement as you experienced at the beginning with Katherine, where there is an awareness of attention to a sensation. And somehow that when those two come together, something happens in the brain. And learning starts developing according to that. And you'll see sensation, attention, learning as the first bullet. The second bullet is the embodied awareness of movement patterns. So once a movement becomes successful in what the mind wants, the movement repeats itself. And when it repeats itself, it starts to form a conceptual idea that this is possible and this is how I get from here to here. And this is foundational to how the human brain learns. And what's strange about it is that we can't feel it. We can't feel the organization of how the physicalness and the mental come together. And Feldenkrais work is really about getting organized. Like, we're doing a remodel here, and my job is to organize all the tools and the equipment and the bills and everything, so that everything runs smoothly, and everything is going so much quicker than we ever thought. In the same way, Feldenkrais work brings and introduces an awareness and brings in this awareness of the synergy between the mind and the body. I put together this program that put these three concepts together: the Feldenkrais method with sensation, attention, learning, embodied awareness with movement patterns and learning, and what scientists call body ownership, which you can look in the references of this research. It's fascinating, and it was a paradigm for really understanding how important this is to education and healthcare. And that is that it's called the rubber hand illusion. Is anybody familiar with that? Anybody familiar with that? I didn't see that. So basically, it's about being in the body, but thinking that what your body is doing is something different than what you realize it's doing. So that's basically the organization of how the body and the mind work together. And Feldenkrais work is opening up an awareness of that. So that's a possibility. Now, what's really interesting, and as you could heard with Beth, is when we do it with children, because cognition isn't so developed yet, the sensory body is still so alive. They're like bundles of sensation taking information in. They can feel it. They can start to feel what's going on. And we got, in total honesty, very serendipitous discovery. I had no idea that this was going to happen because I had been working with adults for 30 years. But the school reported a decrease in violence, in stress, and depression. And I know it doesn't seem possible. Yeah. It's a really big stretch. And this was just applied research. This wasn't the formal research where we did something and then we got repeated and we actually implement it. But I'm going to get to that point for a minute. So just bear with me. It improved social emotional well-being. It improved physical symptoms like teeth grinding or insomnia. So basically it was just calming and settling the children, and the physicalness got improved according to it. But what really blew my mind was it improved very severe attention deficit disorders. Children that you could say one direction and they looked like they were understanding what you were saying, and then they go climb a wall or run under a table. Move to being able to listen to directions and even put two directions together, follow that direction, and even get more aware of themselves and in turn more aware of the peers around them. So I was invited to speak talk, and it was the Movement and Cognition Conference held at Harvard in July of 2018. And there were international researchers around the world that had research on how the body and the mind are interconnected. For 15, 20 years, it's been out there. The brain's low-level sensory motor circuits do not just feed into cognition. They are cognition. This is huge. Why isn't this in schools? Why is this kind in schools? Well, in every talk that I went to, and I maybe went to maybe 30 of them, there was over 300. There wasn't a method to actually understand how to enhance this innate intelligence of the body and how it works together with the brain. So that's what Moshe Feldenkrais did. And how he did it was put together that attention to sensation and also work on movement. What does nature naturally do with the movement development? So I tried to teach this to other people and they couldn't do it. We couldn't get the responses that we were hoping, especially with the cognitive disorders. So the superintendent and the principal and I got together and we stripped the program of everything that they couldn't do. And we put together a program that anybody can do. And this is we had a pilot school. We ran the program for 8 years. This is the principal of the pilot school.
You know, between the character development and the academic development, that really, I felt like I saw the combination, the recipe needed for a school to really be as potential, to reach their highest potential, you know. But nonetheless, I'll preach it until the day I die, that if you're going to teach anything to improve school culture on your campus, to improve student behavior, teach them the home breath. Teach them a simple breathing technique that can, as far as the biggest bang for the buck, the most return on investment. If you teach an entire school, faculty, staff, students, how to do a proper home breath and when to use it and why to use it, hands down, I mean, there is no question that you'll improve behaviors on campus, and there is then the downstream consequences, the positive consequences, you know, that result.
So we put together this program. It's free, it's online, it's for elementary schools. This is the link. And we gave the teachers and parents and principals some tutoring on, or actually we got tutoring from them on how to approach this. And it's actually an animation video that has a user guide as well that helps the children start to feel the relationship of what's going on in their body to what they're thinking and feeling, and the internal dialogue that's happening. You're all teachers, or you're all connected to teachers. You know that when you're teaching your students, there's something going on inside them of how they're listening to what you're saying, who they are, where they're coming from, what they don't understand, what they do understand. This kind of education gives them that awareness, that clarity of what that is. Teach it when they're young, and it starts to improve as they age. That testimony was given 5 years after we were even in the schools. This is the piece that I want to just share with you, because the variables that we used was attention, the movement of breath, the sound of breath, and having some awareness down inside of our body with the children. I don't know. I'm not trained in the academic education. I'm trained in the Feldenkrais 4. But I will do whatever I can to help this get bridged into the systems of education, because 5 years later, this principal told me that these kids are still improving. Kids that had attention deficit, severe attention deficit. Those were the extreme. Kids that had chronic conditions of physical ailments like insomnia and grinding their teeth. I wanna stop there and hand it back to the other Katherine, and give you all a chance to ask some questions, make some comments, whatever you want to share of what you're hearing from us, because this is you're joining us in like a very frontier territory, and we need to hear from you and how we can actually adapt it to what you're interested in. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you in a little bit.
So do you want to stop the share on your end?
Oh yeah, sorry.
That's okay. All right. So, so Beth and Katherine worked in, but this project over here on the left, the Feldenkrais and Math project that was done in Israel, that has been with middle school and 7, 8, grade 9, so older students. And in the resources list, we've got a couple of references to studies that have been done at the university level. So just to sort of broaden the horizon a little bit. So these are our thoughts at this point in time. The value that we think that the Feldenkrais method, or somehow working with it in classrooms, whether it's K-12 or even university level for that matter, could add value, since it is really about inquiry, and inquiry is a key aspect of student learning, and also teachers learning to be teachers and teachers growing throughout their career. Student perception, the image of self, the attention, awareness, learning connection. Katherine Mitchell talked about that. Even the nature of inquiry. What does it mean to inquire? And Beth gave you an example of a concept, learning a concept. There are some in the work of Eilat Almagor and Dorit Aharonov, and then various other individuals that were part of their team, and working in Israel on that. Had I known about this when I was a classroom teacher, or even while I was working in teacher education, helping undergraduate students become, I would have brought this in as a very powerful tool to help them better know themselves. By better knowing themselves, then they can connect that with how do I think about teaching, and what do I think learning is. And so I just think it's this really ripe environment, but I'm not in academia anymore. So some of the theoretical frameworks or theoretical underpinnings, or theories that came to mind for us, because obviously when you do research, you have to connect it to something beyond one's personal experience. Body ownership, Living Educational Theory, that's Jack Whitehead's work. Phenomenology, that's a framework that can be used for the design of a study, if you will. Teacher learning, teacher self-study, reflexivity. Adaptive resonance theory is actually looking at what's going on inside the brain and the neural circuits that are taking place when you start paying attention to sensation and awareness and learning and pulling that connection together. So I thought there's some interesting connections there to draw on. Let's see. So that's sort of what we've conceptualized as far as sharing with you. There's a lot that one can say about the method itself, but we chose not to go into the details at this point. But whatever questions you have, feel free to pose them. Our contact information is on this particular slide, so you can screenshot it if you like. I did create a PowerPoint with an audio track that the audio track didn't come through on the website beforehand, and we'll put this PowerPoint in some place where you can get to it as well, albeit that with the recording, you'll be able to access all of that information anyways. So the rest of the slides are books written by Feldenkrais, starting in 1931. And he was a very high-level martial artist, so that's why you'll see some books about judo. And articles. He died in 1984. Some interviews. There are organizations that are promoting his work worldwide. The International Feldenkrais Federation actually has a research group. A number of those folks are based out of the United States. And then we have pulled together a number of resources that one could click on. Those are all active links. So in the PowerPoint, you can peruse through that a little bit more. But we wanted to make sure that we had some time for dialogue and any burning questions that you might have. Thoughts that you might have. Can you see a place for this? Do you have grad students looking for research topics? Any of those kinds of things.
One question I have is if you've looked into affect theory at all as a connection, which is talking about emotional responses as a whole body experience, and rather than the cognitive side, but the emotional side of the connection between whole body and emotional experiences of things.
Yeah. Thank you. I'd like to share a little bit about that. That was probably the biggest door opening in schools, because the school counselors were so familiar with that. And what we were doing was we were working together with them to have the awareness of the physicalness of the body for the child to understand the emotions. So we were kind of flipping it on its head, yeah, in the same concept of, but the wholeness of what can we do to help people clarify the uniqueness of who they are and what they're feeling to how they learn. And it's harder to do with adults when they feel the physicalness of the body without a lot of practice. But when children feel it, the physicalness of their body, they understand the emotion that they're feeling and the effects that the emotion is having to their how they learn. Like, for example, I had a child. We asked the teachers I taught through all kinds of minds as well, and they wanted the teachers to pick one student to for the teacher to focus on that was the hardest, and it was this third grade child. It was a little girl, and she couldn't read. She couldn't read yet, and she was in third grade. And after we taught the kids that just that attention to sensation, and that similar to what you experienced at the beginning, yeah, with the attention to your breathing and the movement of your jaw. When we did that with the kids, the feeling after the lesson, that sensation of who they are in their body, we called home. When the child that couldn't learn to read, she raised her hand, and the teacher called on her, and she said, "I can't breathe." And when she stopped breathing, she couldn't listen, and she couldn't read, and she couldn't hear, and she couldn't understand anything. So they actually did the get sensational attention technique. There's 2 tracks, one short and one long, which they just did the short track. She dropped inside of herself, and she was able, and she learned how to listen and read. And the teacher asked her, just listen from there. Yeah. So it was the physicalness that there was something there to say, this is the emotion, the effect of the emotion. It's getting mirrored in this physicalness. And the child, once they could feel that, they could tell the teacher what was going on with them and why they couldn't learn. Does that address your comment? You're muted. You're muted.
I was fumbling with my mouse. Yeah, no, I'm still trying to understand affect theory a little bit. And it can get really kind of jargony and philosophical. So I'm trying to look for connections also. And yeah, that helps.
So, Michael, when I think about, I don't know affect theory as a framework at all, but affect in its association with emotion, in the Feldenkrais experiences, remember I said something to you about take care of yourself, pause when you need to, do less. And I asked you a question about of your feeling state at the beginning. Were you able to wait patiently? Did you want to move on? Right. Another question one could ask is, how do you feel? Right. What emotion is somebody experiencing? And then the experience is crafted in such a way that the individual, see, I know the word affective filter. So everything that we do is within attention to the affective filter, which how that does or doesn't play into affect theory, there may be no connection. But it's always with an eye towards safety in the learning environment, not just physically, but emotionally and socially. It's sort of embedded in the process. And then in the end, the benefit might be changes in emotional states lived. That's my speculation. So I hope you don't mind, but as being an explorer into uncharted research territory slide, I added affective theory contributed by Michael Kamen in session so that it's on the list, because something in my gut tells me there probably is a connection in some way.
Yeah, I can check the references that I've used and point you towards some stuff too, if you like.
Sure.
Again, it's sort of, I've done one publication with a colleague that we published in a book that was a sort of drama and affect in the context of affect theory. So the colleague was sort of introducing me to it, and it just rang as overlapping in terms of looking at experience through body, not just mind,
Mhm.
but more from an emotional context. How we, the emotional side of that.
Mhm. When Moshe Feldenkrais started teaching this work in Israel back in the 1950s, his first students, adults, were people that were survivors of the Holocaust. And so this whole, what we now call a learning system, his thinking was really oriented towards how do I help people move through huge traumas and shocks, and is there a way to help them return emotional dignity to their lives, a sense of worth and self? And so in that sense, I would imagine that there are huge connections to affect theory. It just depends on how you chart your pathway through.
So taking us away in a way from affect theory into the utility of this method, I'm thinking of one school I work with where kids have come back in post-COVID and there is complete lack of focus. They have no sense of worth. They're going crazy. They haven't been in a controlled environment for 2 years. Do you see this as something we can attempt to use with them? I know I've got to read up a lot about it. This is the first time I've heard about the method, but I'm really intrigued by it and its utilization in classrooms.
Mm-hmm. Short answer, yes, Pamela, definitely.
Okay. Okay.
And feel free to contact me or Katherine or Beth, bounce ideas off of us, suggestions. And you're up in Connecticut. There are a lot of Feldenkrais practitioners and trainers in the New York City area.
Can you send me some contact information on that?
Yes, I can.
Maybe I can have one of them come in and talk to the group of the school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you bet.
Pamela, I was just curious, what grade level are you talking about here?
A middle to high.
Yeah.
6 through 12, actually.
Because I know that for me, with my second graders, I mean, these students here have been, learning remotely for 2 years, or when we started the school year, I guess it was about 1.5 years. And when they came in, I really, pretty quickly concluded that they were second grade bodies with kindergarten brains. And they just were so used to distance learning that they didn't have, hadn't had an experience with being in person and understanding that, in the 3-dimensional world, we can see you and we can hear you, and, don't tear your Velcro on your shoes. And so there were times at the beginning of the year when I would say, listen, I am not background music, because they were used to sitting and listening kind of, out of the side of their ear while they were doing something else in front of the screen. And so it took a while, and they learned the appropriate behaviors for being in the classroom. And then comes one day that a student who had been distance learning all the way through this school year too joined my class. And he came in completely, again, oblivious to, classroom norms for you don't interrupt the class, you don't get up out of your seat and walk around, you don't, they just, it's just a learnable skill that he had not learned while all of the other students did learn it. So, I mean, this pandemic has been just such an interesting, sociological experiment to see how distance learning affects people. And I can't imagine what it's like with, middle school and high school. That's a completely other, environment for a teacher to work in, going from distance learning to in person. But I think the Feldenkrais work can help anybody learn how to do anything better. Basically, if you move, you can improve, how you function in any way. by integrating this approach into, whether it's skiing or music or spinning plates or how you cook or how you write or creativity, really any kind of human functioning can improve with applying these principles of learning.
I just want to say thank you all. I think it's time
Yeah,
to move over to the closing session.
that's why I put our final slide up. So thank you for attending. And if something comes up post-session, please contact us.
You bet.
I
Good to
will.
see you
So
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Aloha.